Everyone refused to save the paralyzed alien girl, except this human soldier. The scope's crosshairs drifted across a tide of blue-skinned bodies flooding through the checkpoint. Thousands of them, pushing and shoving toward the transport ships as artillery thunder rolled across the city's skeleton. Captain James Harding tracked each face with mechanical precision, watching for the target's distinctive ridge patterns while his finger rested feather-light against the trigger guard. Sierra 6, confirmation on HVT approach vector. His handler's voice crackled through the earpiece, flat and corporate despite the chaos 300 meters below his hide site. Negative contact, James said. He shifted the rifle, scanning deeper into the crowd. The invasion force had given them 6 hours to evacuate before the bombardment leveled everything. 4 hours remained, and the Cathari were showing their true nature, survival of the strongest, the fastest, the most whole. His jaw tightened as he watched families splinter, the young and fit surging ahead while the elderly stumbled and fell. Then he saw her. She sat alone in some kind of wheeled chair near the checkpoint's concrete barriers, pale blue skin luminous even through the dust-choked air. Her vibrant blue hair whipped in the wind from a nearby fire, and those distinctive cat-like ears were pinned back against her skull. People streamed around her like water around a stone, not one of them slowing, not one of them looking back. James watched a Cathari male, broad-shouldered, probably military, glance at her as he passed. Their eyes met. The male kept walking. Sierra 6, target should be entering the kill box in 90 seconds. Prepare to deploy tracker on my mark. He didn't respond. His scope stayed locked on the girl as she gripped her wheels, trying to propel herself forward. The chair lurched maybe a foot before the crowd's momentum knocked it sideways. She caught herself on one arm, hair falling across her face. Through the magnification, he could see her shoulders shaking. She wasn't crying, she was laughing. A bitter, broken sound he couldn't hear but recognized in every line of her body. Sierra 6, acknowledge. James lifted his eye from the scope. His mission parameters were clean. Mark the target with a tracker, confirm upload to satellite, extract before the bombardment. 20 minutes of work for a 6-figure payout. The tracker would let the handlers monitor the target's movements through the peace talks, ensure no surprises during the treaty negotiations. Simple. Surgical. None of his business what happened after. He put his eye back to the scope. The girl had given up on the wheels. She was dragging herself forward on her arms, pulling her useless legs behind her, fingers scrabbling against broken concrete. The crowd trampled past her without breaking stride. Sierra 6, target acquired, moving through checkpoint now, tag and extract. James found his target in the scope. A Cathari official with the right ridge patterns surrounded by security. Easy shot for the tracker. His hand moved toward the specialized rifle without conscious thought. Years of training taking over. The girl fell. Her arms gave out and she collapsed face first into the rubble. A boot caught her shoulder as someone rushed past, spinning her onto her back. She stared up at the smoke-filled sky, chest heaving, and stopped trying to rise. Sierra 6, 15 seconds to optimal firing window. He could make the shot. Tag the target, get paid, be back at base before the city disappeared under thermobaric hellfire. 30 minutes from now, the girl would be atomized along with everything else these people hadn't deemed worthy of saving. James set down the tracker rifle. Sierra 6, respond, you have the shot. He was already moving, breaking down his position with practiced efficiency. The long gun went into its case. Sidearm came out. He slung his pack and started down the building's fire escape at a controlled fall, dropping 10 feet at a time between landings. Sierra 6, what the fuck are you doing? Signal's breaking up, James said, and switched off the radio. The street level hit him like a physical force. Heat, smoke, the copper salt smell of blood mixing with burning plastic. The crowd's roar drowned out everything else as he pushed into the current, moving perpendicular to the flow. Elbows caught his ribs. Someone's ridge crest scraped his jaw. He kept his hand on his weapon, but didn't draw, just forced his way through meat and panic toward where she'd fallen. A gap opened in the press of bodies, and he saw her, still on her back, one arm raised defensively as feet hammered past inches from her head. Her eyes were squeezed shut, blue hair fanned across rubble and dried blood that wasn't hers. James reached her as a charging Cathari male came straight at them. He caught the male's shoulder and redirected him hard enough to send him sprawling into the crowd. 2 more steps, and he was standing over her, boots planted on either side of her chest, becoming an island in the flood. Her eyes snapped open. They were the color of deep water, almost violet in the right light, and they fixed on him with startled intensity. "Can you hold on?" he asked. She stared at him like he was speaking a dead language. James didn't wait for an answer. He crouched, got one arm under her shoulders and the other behind her knees, and lifted. She weighed less than his pack, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. Her arms came around his neck instinctively, and he felt her whole body go rigid with surprise. "I've got you," he said, and started moving. The crowd fought him every step. He kept his center of gravity low, using his mass and momentum to forge ahead, never stopping even when impacts threatened his balance. The girl's breath was hot against his neck, coming fast and shallow. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, hard enough to hurt through the tack vest. "You're human," she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, with a resonant quality that made it carry even through the noise. "Yeah." "Why?" "Long story." Artillery screamed overhead. The impact hit 3 blocks north, close enough that the shockwave rippled through the crowd and sent dozens stumbling. James rode it out, boots planted until the pressure wave passed, then kept moving. The checkpoint was 50 meters ahead, and the Cathari guards were already sealing the gates. "You can't carry me through," she said. "They won't allow it. I'm marked." "Marked how?" She pulled one arm from his neck and yanked up her sleeve. A symbol had been branded into her blue skin, geometric, harsh. He'd seen similar marks before, usually on prisoners or slaves. "Defective," she said. "Worthless. They'll shoot you for trying to take me." James shifted her weight, freeing his right hand enough to pull his sidearm. "They can try." Her laugh came out shaky. "You're insane." "That's what my psych eval said." The checkpoint gate was 3/4 closed. James broke into a run, each impact jarring through his legs as the girl bounced against his chest. The guards saw him coming and raised their rifles, old Cathari military hardware that would punch through his vest like wet paper. "Human, stop," one of them shouted. James didn't stop. 20 meters. 15. His finger found the trigger guard but didn't enter it, weapon still pointed down. 10 meters. The gate was closing fast enough he could hear the hydraulics screaming. "I said stop." 5 meters. One of the guards stepped forward, rifle aimed at James's center mass. James hit him with his shoulder without breaking stride, sending the guard sprawling. The other one swung his rifle barrel toward James's head. The girl's arm shot out and caught the rifle mid-swing, redirecting it just enough that the guard's momentum carried him past them. Then they were through, into the processing area beyond. James heard shouts behind them, but the guards didn't pursue. The crowd was pressing too hard for them to leave their posts. He set the girl down on a concrete bench near the medical triage area, breathing hard. She still had her arms around his neck. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah." "James." He gently unwound her arms and stepped back, checking their surroundings. The triage area was pure chaos. Wounded everywhere, overwhelmed medics, no organization. "Can you stay here? I need to find transport." "You're actually trying to get me off-world." "That's the plan." "Why?" Her eyes searched his face. "You don't know me. I'm nothing to your people. Why would you risk this?" James looked back at the checkpoint, at the thousands still fighting to escape, at the guards who hadn't seen a girl worth saving. His radio crackled in his ear, his handler screaming demands and threats into dead air. "Because everyone else wouldn't," he said. He turned to scan for transport options. Behind him, Sarah made a sound like a caught breath. When he looked back, she was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe, or something deeper. An explosion lit the eastern sky. Closer than before, the bombardment was starting early. James's earpiece crackled to life with his handler's voice, cold and precise. "Sierra 6, civilian casualties are acceptable. Complete primary objective or you're burned." He reached up and crushed the earpiece in his fist. "Change of plans," he said, moving back to Sarah. "We need to go now." "What's wrong?" Everything, he thought. He'd just gone dark on a Black Ops contract, missed his objective, and saved someone they might have wanted dead. But when he looked at her, at those deep blue eyes watching him with cautious hope no one had given her reason to feel, he couldn't bring himself to care. "Nothing we can't handle," he said, and lifted her into his arms again. Her weight settled against his chest like it belonged there. The transport depot was a killing field waiting to happen. James carried Sierra through the press of bodies, eyes tracking every angle, every choke point. Too many people, too few ships, and the Cathari were showing their teeth now that escape was slipping away. He'd seen panic turn to violence before. They had maybe 10 minutes before this powder keg blew. "There," Sarah said against his ear, her breath warm. "Southwest corner, that hauler's engines are already hot." James looked. She was right. He could see the heat shimmer now that she'd pointed it out, but he'd missed it in the chaos. "Good eyes." "Not eyes," she tapped one of her cat-like ears. "I can hear the turbine frequency and feel the heat differential against my skin." He filled that information away and adjusted course toward the hauler. The crowd thinned as they moved away from the main gates. Thinner meant faster, but it also meant more exposed. His instincts were screaming that something was wrong, that this was too easy, but he couldn't identify the threat. Sarah stiffened in his arms. "Stop." He froze mid-step. "What?" Footsteps, multiple sources moving tactically, 20 meters ahead, using the container stacks as cover. James set her down behind a supply crate and drew his sidearm. His eyes scanned the containers, but saw nothing. Then a shadow shifted wrong, and he caught the outline of a Cathari in militia gear sweeping toward them. "How many?" he whispered. 4, no 5, one's moving to flank left." The militia came around the containers in a loose formation, weapons raised. Local defense force, probably deserters looking to secure their own transport. Their leader, a scarred male with military bearings, spotted James and barked something in Cathari. The tone made the meaning clear enough. James kept his weapon lowered but ready. "We're just passing through." "Human," the leader switched to heavily accented English. "You carrying defective, worth nothing. Give us your weapons, your pack. You walk away." "Can't do that." The leader's ridge crest flared, aggression display. "Then you die here." The militia spread out, creating overlapping fields of fire. Professional movement. James ran the math. 5 targets, 1 magazine, maybe 3 seconds before they opened up. Sarah was completely exposed. The odds were shit. "James," Sarah said quietly. Her hand found his ankle, squeezed once. The one flanking left, he's favoring his right leg. Old injury. James's mind clicked through the tactical implications. How close? 8 meters, 7.6. The flanker came around the corner, and James moved. He was on the male in 2 strides, inside his weapon's arc before he could react. James's elbow drove into the male's throat, collapsing his airway. As the male dropped, James caught his rifle and spun, using the falling body as cover while he acquired the next target. The leader shouted. 2 militia opened fire. Rounds sparked off metal behind James as he dropped prone and returned fire. The rifle was unfamiliar but functional. He put 3 rounds through the closer shooter's center mass and rolled left as return fire chewed up his previous position. 12 o'clock behind the blue container, Sarah called out. "Leaning out, now." James fired blind based on her call. A body hit the ground, 3 down. The leader and 1 remaining militia broke and ran for the hauler. James pushed to his feet and sprinted back to Sarah, scooping her up without breaking stride. The hauler's engines were screaming now. They were trying to steal his ride. "Hold on," he said, and ran. Sarah's arms locked around his neck. Her body pressed against his chest, and he could feel her heart hammering against his ribs. The hauler's loading ramp was already rising as they closed the distance. 20 meters. 15. The ramp was at 45 degrees now, too steep to run up while carrying her. James didn't slow. At the last second, he shifted Sarah's weight, got his legs under him, and jumped. His boots hit the ramp and he drove forward with everything he had, running uphill as hydraulics fought to close them out. Sarah's breath caught as they cleared the top edge and tumbled into the cargo bay. The leader was in the cockpit, hands flying over controls. The remaining militia turned with his weapon raised. James was faster. One shot, center mass, and the male went down. The hauler lurched upward. James rolled to his feet and moved toward the cockpit, leaving Sierra against the bulkhead. The leader saw him coming and drew a sidearm. James caught his wrist and slammed it against the console until the weapon clattered free. They grappled in the tight space, the hauler bucking and weaving as automated defenses tried to stop their unauthorized departure. The leader was strong, augmented muscles, giving him an edge James had to counter with technique. James broke the male's grip, got behind him, and applied a chokehold. The leader thrashed for 10 seconds before going limp. James held it for 5 more, then released. The male crumpled. The hauler's alarms were screaming. James dropped into the pilot's seat and pulled up the navigation display. They were already outside the city's airspace, but pursuit craft were launching from the military base to the north. He pushed the throttle forward, and the hauler responded with a grinding protest. This thing was meant for cargo, not evasive maneuvers. "James!" Sarah's voice cut through the alarm noise. He looked back. She dragged herself to the cargo bay's view screen, using her arms to pull her body across the deck. On the screen, the city they'd just left was disappearing under a blanket of fire. Thermobaric munitions turning everything to ash and pressure waves. The evacuation had been cut short. Thousands still down there. James forced himself to look away and focus on flying. Feeling anything about it wouldn't change what happened. The pursuit craft were closing fast. Atmospheric fighters with actual weapon systems. He couldn't outrun them, couldn't outgun them. All he could do was try to reach the upper atmosphere before they got a missile lock. "Can you make it to the co-pilot station?" he asked. Sarah looked at the raised seat, then at her useless legs. "No." "Then I need you to be my eyes. Those fighters will come from low and behind. Your hearing might give us a few seconds warning." She nodded and positioned herself where she could see the rear display. James watched her in his peripheral vision, the set of her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the deck plating. No complaint, no self-pity, just focus. The hauler shuddered as they hit the thermocline. The pursuit craft were still closing. 2 minutes to viable orbit, 90 seconds. Distance to fighters, 4 kilometers and shrinking. "I hear targeting systems," Sarah said. "High-pitched whine, they're locking on." James rolled the hauler, sacrificing altitude for lateral movement. Something streaked past the viewport, missile contrail. Too close. He pushed the throttle past safety limits, and the engines screamed in protest. "Second launch," Sarah said. "Different frequency, 2 missiles coming from below us?" James looked at the tactical display. She was right. The second fighter had dove and was firing upward. Smart. Cutting off his escape vectors. He killed the throttle and let the hauler drop, belly toward the planet. The missiles overshot, proximity fuses too slow to adjust. He reignited the engines and burned hard for orbit. The fighters were wheeling around for another pass. 30 seconds to minimum orbital insertion. 20. The hull was heating up, atmospheric friction turning them into a meteor. "They're breaking off," Sarah said. They're returning to base." James checked the display. She was right. The fighters had turned away, heading back toward the burning city. He didn't trust it, kept pushing until they cleared the gravity well and the hauler's orbital systems kicked in. Only then did he let himself breathe. His hands were shaking on the controls, adrenaline crash hitting hard. He locked the nav system on a heading toward the neutral station at Lagrange Point 3 and engaged autopilot. Sarah was watching him from the floor, hair disheveled, blue skin smudged with dust and blood, but those deep violet eyes were clear and steady. "You're bleeding," she said, looking at his side. James looked down. Blood was seeping through his shirt. Must have caught something during the fight with the militia. The wound wasn't deep, but it was bleeding more than it should. He pulled a field dressing from his vest and pressed it against the injury. "I've had worse. Let me see. You're on the floor. Then help me up." James moved to her, lifting her onto one of the cargo bay's bench seats. This close, he could see the exhaustion in her face. the way her arms trembled from hauling herself around. She'd pushed herself past her limits and hadn't said a word about it. She pulled his shirt up without asking permission, examining the wound with surprising competence. Her fingers were cool against his skin as she peeled away the hasty dressing. "Graze, not penetration," she said. "You're lucky. Another inch and it would have hit something important." Story of my life. She found his med kit and started cleaning the wound properly. Her hands were steady, movements efficient. "You've done this before," James said. "Medical training, before." She gestured vaguely at her legs. "I was going to be a physician, then the accident happened, and suddenly I wasn't qualified for anything." "That's insane. That's Cathari culture, wholeness of body, wholeness of spirit, damage one, damage both." She applied antiseptic and he hissed through his teeth. "Sorry." "It's fine, keep going." She worked in silence for a moment, wrapping clean bandages around his torso. Her face was close enough that he could see the faint bioluminescent patterns in her skin, swirls and constellations that pulsed with her heartbeat. "Why were you really there?" she asked quietly. "In that city, humans don't have a presence in that sector." James met her eyes. The truth sat heavy in his chest, but the lies felt heavier. "I was on a job." "What kind of job?" "The kind I'm not supposed to talk about." Her hands stilled. "And me? Was I part of the job?" The question hung between them. James could see her drawing conclusions, putting pieces together. She was too smart to miss the implications. "No," he said, and it was true enough. "You weren't part of the plan." "Then what was I?" "A choice." She secured the last bandage and leaned back, studying him. "You gave up your mission for me, a stranger, someone your people would probably consider defective too." "My people don't think that way." "Don't they?" Her voice was soft but sharp. "I've studied human history. You've got your own ugly chapters about who deserves help and who gets left behind." "Yeah," James admitted, "we do, but some of us decided to be better than that." Sarah looked away, something complex moving across her face. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible over the engine hum. "No one's ever chosen me before. Not since the accident. My own family wouldn't even look at me by the end." James didn't know what to say to that. Words felt inadequate. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were slender, stronger than they looked. They curled around his and held on. They sat like that for a long moment, the hauler carrying them toward safety, the burning planet falling away behind them. Then the ship's comm system crackled to life. "Unidentified hauler, this is Qatari Naval Command. You are in possession of stolen property. Cut engines and prepare to be boarded." Sarah's hand tightened on his. James looked at the tactical display. 3 naval cutters were closing on an intercept course. Fast, armed, and very serious about taking them down. "That's not about the ship, is it?" he said. Sarah shook her head. "They're coming for me." James killed the autopilot and took manual control. The cutters were military-grade, faster than his stolen hauler by an order of magnitude. Running wasn't an option. Fighting 3 armed warships in a cargo vessel was suicide. That left talking, and he had a feeling conversation wasn't going to work. "Why do they want you badly enough to scramble warships?" he asked, already plotting vectors on the nav display. Sarah's face had gone carefully blank. "I told you I'm defective, worthless." "Worthless people don't get a naval response. Try again." She was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat. "My father is Chancellor Davros. He leads the Qatari High Council." James's hands froze on the controls. "Say that again." "I'm his daughter, his embarrassment. 3 years ago, I was in a shuttle accident, spinal damage. The physician said I'd never walk again." She laughed, bitter. "He kept me hidden after that. Couldn't have the Chancellor's bloodline tainted by disability. When the invasion came, he had me relocated to that city, told everyone I was in the inner provinces, safe. Really, he just put me somewhere the problem could solve itself." James's mind raced through the implications. High-value target, political liability. His mission briefing suddenly made terrible sense. His handler had known exactly who would be in that city, exactly where she'd be. Civilian casualties are acceptable. They'd wanted her dead in the chaos, clean, deniable. And he'd saved her. "The hauler will respond," the comm crackled again. You have 30 seconds to comply before we open fire. James pulled up his mission files on his wrist terminal, fingers flying through encrypted directories he wasn't supposed to access. There had to be something, some confirmation of what he was starting to suspect. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "Checking something." He bypassed 2 security layers, skills they'd taught him for fieldwork. The mission brief appeared on screen: target profile, objective parameters, secondary considerations. There, a single line buried in the contingency section. Asset Sarah Davros, eliminate if opportunity presents, staging to appear as collateral damage. The words sat on the screen like a confession. James felt something cold settle in his gut. "What is it?" Sarah leaned closer, trying to see the display. He turned the terminal toward her, watched her read it, watched the color drain from her already pale blue skin. "You were sent to kill me," she whispered. "I didn't know, not until—" He stopped. When had he known? The handler's voice in his ear, accepting her death as acceptable. The way they'd positioned him with perfect line of sight to where she'd been abandoned. "I suspected something was wrong when they told me civilian casualties were acceptable. But I didn't know it was you specifically until just now." Sarah pulled back from him, arms wrapping around herself. "Who hired you?" "Private military contractor, Blackwell Securities. They don't ask questions, just take jobs. But someone wanted you dead and made it look like military intelligence." He checked the tactical display. The cutters were 20 seconds from firing range. Someone who profits from this war continuing. "The treaty." Sarah's eyes widened. "My father is negotiating peace terms. If I died in the invasion, She pressed her hands to her face. "He'd blame the other side, call off negotiations. The war would go on for years." "And someone gets rich off the weapons sales, the reconstruction contracts, all of it." James's jaw tightened. "They played both sides. Your people wouldn't save you. My people would kill you. Either way, you disappear and the war machine keeps turning." "Final warning," the comm barked. "Cut engines now or we will disable your vessel." Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. "You should kill me." "What?" "Complete your mission. They'll let you go. You can still get paid, get extracted, go home." Her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm already dead to my people. My father wanted me gone. Just finish it." James stood, moved to where she sat, and dropped to one knee so they were eye level. "Listen to me. I don't work for them anymore. I don't follow those orders, and I sure as hell am not going to kill someone who saved my life." "I didn't save your life. That militia fighter you warned me about, he had me dead to rights. You gave me the angle I needed." He took her hand again. "We're in this together now. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to survive this, expose whoever set this up, and make sure your father knows the truth." "How? We're trapped in a cargo hauler against military warships." James grinned, and it wasn't a nice expression. "You said you can hear things other people can't. How's your sense of the ship's systems?" Sarah's ears twitched, orienting toward different parts of the hauler. "Engines are running at 70% capacity. Life support is stable. Cargo bay pressure seals are compromised. There's a leak somewhere." "Perfect." James moved back to the cockpit and started pulling up the hauler's cargo manifest. This ship was hauling construction supplies, including pressurized gas cylinders. "You want to blow us up?" "I want them to think we blew up." His fingers danced across the controls. "Can you hear the cutter's engine signatures? Tell me when they're in optimal range." Sarah closed her eyes, ears swiveling. "They're spreading into a triangle formation, closing from 3 vectors. Distance, hard to measure exactly, but based on the sound delay through space, maybe 12 kilometers. "That's impossible. You can't hear through vacuum." "I can hear the vibrations through our hull when their weapons targeting systems ping us, and I can feel the heat wash when their engines fire." She tilted her head. 10 kilometers now. They're slowing to firing positions." James finished programming the cargo bay sequence and grabbed Sarah, carrying her toward the hauler's emergency pod. It was designed for 2 people, cramped and basic, but it had its own propulsion and life support. "What about the cutters?" Sarah asked as he strapped her in. "They're expecting us to run or surrender. Not this." He climbed in beside her and sealed the hatch. The pod's interior was tight enough that they were pressed shoulder to shoulder. When I blow the cargo bay, those gas cylinders will make a beautiful explosion. The cutters will see a debris field and assume we're dead. What if they check for life signs? The explosion will scramble their sensors long enough for us to get clear, he hoped. This plan had more holes than solid ground, but it was what they had. We'll drift on minimum power, play dead, and hope they believe it. And then we get to neutral territory and figure out who's trying to kill you. Sarah's hand found his in the cramped space. You're betting everything on this working. You have a better idea? No, she squeezed his hand. No one's ever bet on me before. James squeezed back. Get used to it. He triggered the cargo bay sequence. Through the pod's tiny viewport, they watched the hauler's bay doors blow open. Gas cylinders tumbled into space, their safety valves rupturing from sudden decompression. James counted 3 seconds and hit the pod's ejection system. They launched away from the hauler just as the cylinders reached critical pressure. The explosion was massive, a blooming flower of fire and shrapnel that consumed the hauler entirely. The shockwave hit the pod and sent them spinning. James fought the controls, killing all non-essential systems, letting them tumble like debris. Through the viewport, he watched the cutters converge on the wreckage. Their searchlights cut through the expanding debris field. One of them launched a recovery drone, standard procedure for confirming kills. They're scanning the wreckage, Sarah whispered. I can hear the active sensors. They're looking for bodies. Let them look. We vented the cargo bay. Any biological traces will have been flash frozen and scattered across 1/2 kilometer. They drifted in silence, the pod's systems barely above standby. James counted the seconds, watching the cutters circle the debris field like sharks. 5 minutes. 10. The pod's interior was getting cold, life support at minimum to avoid detection. Sarah was shivering. James put his arm around her, sharing body heat in the confined space. She didn't pull away, just leaned into him. I can hear your heartbeat, she said quietly. Yeah? It's fast, you're scared. Terrified, James admitted. This plan was terrible. But it's working. She tilted her head up to look at him. They were close enough that he could see the bioluminescent patterns in her skin pulsing steadily. You're insane, but it's working. That's my specialty, insane plans that technically work. One of the cutters was moving closer to their position. James held his breath, finger hovering over the pod's emergency burn. If they spotted the pod, he'd have maybe 2 seconds to fire the engines and hope they could outmaneuver. The cutter turned away. Its engines flared and it began moving back toward Cathari space. The other 2 followed. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving nothing but debris and frozen gas clouds. James waited another 10 minutes before bringing systems back online. Heat flooded the pod interior and Sarah gasped with relief, her shivering gradually subsiding. We're clear, he said. They bought it. Now what? James plotted a course on the pod's limited nav system. Neutral station at Lagrange 3. It's a free port. No military jurisdiction. No questions asked. We can lay low there while we figure out our next move. They'll be looking for us. Let them look. As far as anyone knows, we're dead. He activated the pod's main engines, a gentle burn that would carry them toward safety. We've got time now. Time to plan, time to find proof, time to... He stopped. Sarah was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. What? He asked. You keep saying we, she said. Like this is your fight too. You could dump me at the station and walk away. Disappear. You'd be safe. Could, James agreed. Won't. Why not? He looked at her. This woman who'd been abandoned by her people, marked for death by his, who just survived an explosion and a military manhunt without falling apart, who'd saved his life and trusted him with hers. Because someone needs to prove they're all wrong about you, he said. Might as well be me. Something shifted in her expression, walls coming down. She leaned against him, head resting on his shoulder, and for the first time since he'd found her, she let herself relax. Thank you, she whispered. James didn't answer, just held her as the pod carried them toward safety, toward answers, toward whatever came next. The stars wheeled past the viewport, indifferent and eternal. Behind them, a planet burned. Ahead, somewhere in the dark, enemies were waiting. But in this moment, in this tiny pod drifting through the void, it was just the two of them. And that felt like enough. The neutral station at Lagrange 3 looked like something cobbled together from spare parts and desperation. Modules from a dozen different species bolted together in a sprawling maze that somehow maintained structural integrity. James guided the pod toward a docking port on the station's lower ring, keeping their approach vector unpredictable. Even in neutral space, paranoia kept you alive. "I've never been to a free port," Sarah said, watching the station grow larger in the viewport. "Think of it as organized chaos. No laws except don't damage the station. Everything else is negotiable." James ran through the docking sequence. "Stay close to me, and if anyone asks, you're my partner. Not cargo, not a contract. Partner." Will they believe that? They'll believe whatever story comes with the most money. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud. "We need 3 things: information, supplies, and a way to contact your father without getting killed." "He won't believe me. He never has." "Then we make him believe." James unsealed the hatch and helped Sarah out. The station's gravity was lower than Earth standard, which made carrying her easier, but would take adjustment. "We need evidence, proof of the conspiracy." The docking port opened into a market corridor that assaulted the senses. Alien species haggling in 24 languages, cooking smells that ranged from appetizing to nauseating, holographic advertisements flickering over every surface. James kept his weapon hand-free and his other arm secure around Sarah as they pushed into the crowd. A Vreth merchant tried to block their path, multiple eye stalks swiveling to examine Sarah. "Pretty one. How much you want for?" James's hand went to his sidearm. The Vreth skittered back into its stall. "Charming place," Sarah muttered. "It gets worse." James spotted what he was looking for. A data broker's shop tucked between a weapon dealer and something that might have been a restaurant. In there. The shop was cramped and dark, walls lined with server racks and humming processors. Behind the counter sat a human woman with neural interface ports visible along her temples. She didn't look up from her screens. "We're closed," she said. James set a credit chip on the counter. Military grade, untraceable, loaded with enough funds to buy a small ship. "We're not." The woman's eyes flicked to the chip, then to them. Her gaze lingered on Sarah. "That's a Cathari Chancellor's daughter, which means you're either very brave or very stupid." "Both," James said. "I need information on Blackwell Securities. Specifically, who contracted them for operations in the Kelmar sector 2 days ago." "That kind of information costs more than what's on that chip." James set down another chip. "I've got 3 more where these came from." The woman's fingers danced across her interface. Blackwell keeps their contracts locked behind military-grade encryption, but money leaves traces. Her eyes went distant as she accessed her networks. "Interesting. The payment routing for that operation goes through 4 shell corporations before hitting a holding company registered in the Outer Territories." "Who owns the holding company?" "Still tracing. This will take time." She refocused on them. "You 2 should get off the main concourse. If I can identify her, others will too. Level 3, Section K, Room 47. It's secure, costs extra, already added to your bill." James gathered the remaining chips and lifted Sarah. "How long for the trace?" 6 hours, maybe 8. Come back after second cycle." The woman's expression softened slightly as she looked at Sarah. "Be careful. There's chatter on the networks. Someone's offering serious money for information about survivors from that hauler explosion." "How serious?" "Enough to make people look very hard for ghosts." They left the shop and navigated deeper into the station. Level 3 was quieter, more residential. Section K looked like crew quarters, small rooms stacked along curved corridors. James found 47 and keyed the lock with one of his chips. The room was barely larger than their escape pod. Single bed, tiny bathroom, food synthesizer built into the wall, but it had a security door and no windows. Defensible. James set Sarah on the bed and immediately checked the room for surveillance devices. Clean. He locked the door and engaged the manual deadbolts. 3 of them, solid construction. Then he pulled a portable scanner from his vest and swept for electronic monitoring. Still clean. "Now what?" Sarah asked. "Now we wait." James sat on the floor with his back against the door, weapon within reach. "Get some rest. You've been running on adrenaline for hours." "I can't sleep." "Try anyway. When this kicks off again, we won't have time for rest." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then shifted on the bed. "There's room here. The floor can't be comfortable." "I've slept in worse places." "James," she patted the mattress beside her, "please." He hesitated, then moved to the bed. They arranged themselves carefully, him on top of the covers, her under them, both facing the door. The bed was narrow enough that they were pressed together despite his attempt at distance. "Tell me about Earth," Sarah said quietly. "I've studied it, but that's not the same as knowing it." "What do you want to know?" "Anything, just talk to me." So James talked. He told her about forests that stretched for thousands of miles, oceans deep enough to swallow mountains, cities that glowed like constellations at night. He told her about rain and snow, and the particular quality of sunlight through clouds. He talked until his voice grew rough, and her breathing evened out into sleep. Only then did he allow himself to relax slightly. Her head had found his shoulder, blue hair spilling across his chest. The bioluminescent patterns in her skin pulsed with her heartbeat, slow, steady, peaceful. He watched them trace constellations he didn't recognize and wondered what the hell he was going to do. The smart play was to get her somewhere safe and walk away. Let the politicians sort out their conspiracy. He'd done his part, saved her life, got her clear. Job finished. Except it wasn't finished. Someone had tried to use him as a murder weapon. Someone had decided she was worth less than a continued war. And somewhere in the galaxy, people were profiting from that calculation. James had spent 10 years following orders, trusting his chain of command, believing the missions mattered. Now he didn't know what he believed, but he knew he wasn't walking away from this. He must have dozed because the next thing he knew, Sarah was shaking his shoulder, her face tense. "Someone's in the corridor," she whispered, multiple people moving carefully. James was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn. He checked the door's security monitor. 4 figures in tactical gear, definitely human, moving with professional precision toward their room. "How did they find us?" Sarah asked. "Doesn't matter." James scanned the room for exits, none except the door they were coming through. "Can you tell how many?" 4 outside, but I hear more. Maybe 6 total, they're coordinating through comms. 10 against 1 in a confined space with no backup and someone who couldn't run. The math was clear. The door shuddered as something heavy hit it. Breaching charge. They had maybe 30 seconds before the team came through. James grabbed Sarah and carried her into the bathroom, the only room with a second door to the corridor. It was a maintenance access, barely wide enough for one person, but it was something. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "Getting you out." He forced the access panel open and lifted her into the narrow shaft beyond. "Follow this to the junction, then take the left branch. It'll dump you into the market level. Find somewhere crowded and stay there." "What about you?" "I'm buying you time." "James, there are too many." The main door exploded inward. Smoke and noise filled the room. "Go!" James shoved the access panel closed and turned toward the breach, weapon raised. The first man through the door took 2 rounds to the chest and went down. The second had better armor. James's shots sparked off the plating. He adjusted his aim, put one through the man's exposed throat. The man dropped, gurgling. Return fire chewed up the bathroom door frame. James dropped prone and fired blind around the corner, forcing them to take cover. He used the seconds to reload and assess. 4 hostiles in the main room, moving to flank positions. 2 more stacking outside the door. His ammunition wouldn't last. A flashbang sailed into the bathroom. James closed his eyes and turned away, but the concussion still rattled his skull. He came up firing through the spots in his vision, hitting something that screamed. 3 rounds left. A figure appeared in the doorway. James fired. Click. Empty. He threw the weapon at the figure's head and grabbed his knife. The fight became intimate. James caught the hostile's rifle barrel and drove his knife into the gap between helmet and chest plate. Hot blood sprayed his face. He took the dead man's rifle and put a burst through the next hostile coming through the door. Something hit him from behind, reinforcements from the corridor. James went down hard, knife skittering away. Hands grabbed him, forced him flat. A boot pressed into his spine. "Secure," someone said. "Where's the target?" James said nothing. Someone kicked him in the ribs hard enough that he felt something crack. I asked a question. "Access shaft," another voice said. "She's in the walls." "Then find her. Command wants her alive if possible, but dead works too." 2 of them left. James counted 4 still in the room. His mind raced through options and came up empty. The boot on his spine had him pinned, hands zip-tied behind his back. He'd failed. Sarah was somewhere in the station's maintenance network with trained killers hunting her. Then he heard it, a sound like tearing metal, followed by screaming. The boot left his spine as its owner turned toward the noise. James rolled, got his feet under him, and drove his shoulder into the nearest hostile. They both went down in a tangle. James got his bound hands around the man's throat and squeezed, ignoring the fists hammering his already cracked ribs. The man went limp. James used the corpse's knife to cut his zip ties. More screaming from the corridor. The remaining hostiles were firing at something, their shots wild and panicked. James grabbed a rifle from the floor and moved toward the door. The corridor was chaos. 2 hostiles were down, armor breached, blood pooling. The other 2 were backing away from something James couldn't see. Then one of them flew backwards, slamming into the wall hard enough to leave a dent. His neck was bent at an impossible angle. The last hostile turned to run. Something dark and fast intercepted him. James heard bones breaking. Sarah crawled out of the access shaft, breathing hard. She'd found something in the walls. A length of pipe maybe 4 feet long, heavy alloy. Blood dripped from one end. Her arms were trembling from exertion, but her eyes were clear. "You told me to find somewhere crowded," she said. "I decided to make a crowd run away instead." James stared at her. "You killed 4 people with a pipe." 5, one still in the shaft. She looked at the improvised weapon like she was surprised to find it in her hands. "I might have been defective by their standards, but I was still Cathari military trained before the accident, and I'm very protective of people who don't leave me behind." James started laughing. He couldn't help it, the adrenaline crash mixing with sheer disbelief. Here he was trying to protect her, and she'd just cleared half an assault team with a piece of plumbing. "What?" Sarah demanded. "Nothing, just realizing I might have underestimated you." Alarms were screaming now. Station security would be here in minutes, and James had a feeling they wouldn't be sympathetic. "We need to move," he said. "Can you hold on?" "Do I have a choice?" He lifted her, and she grabbed the pipe, keeping it ready. They ran. The data broker's shop was dark when they arrived, but the woman answered James's pounding immediately, eyes sharp despite the hour. "You've got half the station's mercenaries looking for you," she said, ushering them inside. "Whatever you did, they're offering triple rates now." "Did you finish the trace?" James asked, setting Sarah down on a cargo container. "Finished an hour ago." The woman pulled up a holographic display. "The holding company that paid Blackwell is owned by a consortium of weapons manufacturers, human, Cathari, and 3 other species. They've been playing both sides of this war for 5 years, supplying arms to everyone while lobbying against peace negotiations." "Names," James said. The woman rattled off a dozen corporations. James recognized most of them, major players in the military-industrial complex. But here's where it gets interesting. 6 months ago, they hired a Cathari political consultant named Varric. Former intelligence officer, specializes in psychological operations. Sarah stiffened. "I know that name. He was my father's chief of staff. He resigned after the peace talks began." "Because your father wouldn't abandon the negotiations," the woman said. "Varric joined the consortium immediately after. And according to communications I intercepted, he's been feeding them classified information about your father's diplomatic strategy." James felt the pieces clicking together. He knew about Sarah, knew she was a pressure point. More than that, he's the one who suggested moving her to that city, sold it to the Chancellor as protective custody. The woman's expression was grim. He set her up to die and blamed it on military necessity. "Do you have proof?" Sarah asked. "Every communication, every payment record, every order that traces back to him." The woman pulled a data stick from her terminal. "Enough to bury him and the consortium. But you've got a problem." "Just one?" James said dryly. "Varric knows you survived. He's the one who hired the team that hit your room, and he's got assets throughout this station. You need to get this information to someone who can act on it, and you need to do it before he finds you again." James took the data stick. "Can you get us a secure line to the Cathari High Council?" "I can get you a line to your own military command if you want, but making it secure? That's harder. Varric will have people monitoring all official channels." "What about broadcast?" Sarah said suddenly. "Like I did from the city, public transmission that everyone receives simultaneously." "That works if you don't mind the whole galaxy knowing your business," the woman said. "Maybe that's exactly what we need." Sarah looked at James. "We expose everything publicly, the conspiracy, the assassination attempt, all of it. Make it impossible to cover up." "You'll be painting a bigger target on yourself," James said. "I'm already a target. At least this way, killing me becomes inconvenient for them." Sarah's jaw set with determination. "Can you do it?" The woman considered. "Station has an open broadcast array, normally used for distress signals and public announcements. I can give you access, but you'll have maybe 5 minutes before security or Varric's people shut it down. And every mercenary on this station will know exactly where you are." "5 minutes is enough," Sarah said. James wanted to argue, but he could see she'd made up her mind. And tactically, she was right. Exposure was their only real defense. "Where's the array?" "Central hub, level 7, but you'll never make it there on foot. Not with every gun on the station looking for you." The woman pulled up a station schematic. "However, there's a cargo transit system that runs through the core. Automated, no security. It'll get you close." "How close?" "Within 100 meters. After that, you're on your own." James studied the route. It was insane, which meant it might actually work. "Can you loop the security feeds? Give us a blind spot?" "For 5 minutes, maybe 10. After that, they'll notice the gap and compensate." She handed him an access card. "This will get you into the transit system. After you broadcast, head for Bay 17. I've arranged a ship, nothing fancy, but it's fueled and flight ready. You'll have a narrow window to get there before they lock down the docks." "Why are you helping us?" Sarah asked. The woman's expression softened. "Because I have a daughter, and I'd hope someone would help her if she needed it." She turned back to her screens. "Now get moving. I'll trigger the loop in 30 seconds. James lifted Sarah and they headed for the transit access. The cargo system was designed for containers, not people. Narrow tubes with magnetic rails that shot packages through the station at high speed. They climbed into an empty container, James holding Sarah tight as the system activated. The acceleration was brutal. James braced himself against the container walls, absorbing the impacts as they hurtled through turns and junctions. Sarah's fingers dug into his shoulders, her face pressed against his chest. The ride lasted 90 seconds that felt like hours. They spilled out near the central hub, both of them bruised and disoriented. James took a moment to get his bearings, then moved toward the broadcast array. The corridor was empty. The security loop was working. The array control room was small, dominated by a transmission console. James set Sarah in the operator's chair, and she immediately started working the controls, fingers flying across the interface. "I'm piggybacking on the station's emergency broadcast system," she said. "This will hit every ship, every station, every relay within 50 light years. Can't be blocked or filtered." James stood guard at the door, weapon ready. Down the corridor, he could hear shouting. They'd been found. "How long?" he asked. 30 seconds to establish the link. Sarah slotted the data stick into the console. Then 5 minutes to transmit everything. Footsteps pounded closer. James counted at least 6, maybe more. He checked his ammunition. 1 magazine, 48 rounds against unknown numbers. The math was getting worse. 20 seconds, Sarah said. The first hostile appeared at the corridor intersection. James fired a 3-round burst and the man went down. Return fire sparked off the doorframe. James ducked back, counting muzzle flashes. 8 shooters. He was going to run out of bullets before they ran out of people. 10 seconds. Something rolled into the corridor, grenade. James grabbed it and threw it back. The explosion shook the walls, bought them maybe 5 more seconds. "Broadcasting now," Sarah said. Her voice filled the station speakers, calm and clear. "My name is Sarah Davros, daughter of Chancellor Davros of the Cathari High Council. 3 days ago, I was left to die in an invasion zone as part of a conspiracy to prevent peace negotiations. This transmission contains proof of that conspiracy, including communications between former intelligence officer Varick and a weapons manufacturing consortium." James fired steadily, making every round count. The hostiles were advancing in bounds, professional and coordinated. He hit 2 more, but the others kept coming. Evidence shows systematic manipulation of both Cathari and human military forces with the goal of prolonging the current conflict for profit. A hostile came around the door. James's knife found his throat. Another rushed in behind. James took him down with the butt of his rifle. He was out of ammunition now, fighting hand to hand in the doorway, while Sarah's broadcast played behind him. "I ask that both governments investigate these claims and hold those responsible accountable. To my father, if you're listening, I forgive you. I understand the pressure you were under, but it's time to choose people over politics. Time to choose peace." James took a hit to his shoulder, felt something tear. He kept fighting, using the doorway as a bottleneck. Blood ran down his arm, making his grip slippery. "Transmission complete," Sarah said. "James, we need to go." He grabbed the last hostile's rifle and sprayed the corridor, forcing them back. Then he turned and lifted Sarah, running for the emergency exit the data broker had marked on the schematic. Behind them, the station's comm system was chaos, dozens of voices demanding explanations, confirmation, action. Sarah's broadcast had hit like a bomb. They made it to Bay 17 with hostiles right behind them. The ship was there as promised, a small courier vessel, engines already hot. James carried Sarah up the ramp and slammed the controls. The ramp was still rising when he fired the engines. Weapons fire sparked off their hull as they cleared the docking port. James pushed the throttle forward, taking them up and away from the station. Behind them, ships were scrambling to pursue, but the confusion bought them precious seconds. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked from the co-pilot station where he'd secured her. "Away from here. After that." James pulled up the nav display with shaking hands. His shoulder was bleeding badly now, darkening his entire left side. "I don't know. Somewhere they won't look." "James," Sarah's voice was sharp. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Let me see." He wanted to argue, but the adrenaline was wearing off and the pain was getting hard to ignore. He engaged the autopilot on a random heading and let Sarah examine the wound. "It's deep," she said quietly. "You need proper medical attention." "Can't exactly walk into a hospital right now." "Then let me do what I can." She found the ship's medical kit and started cleaning the wound. Her hands were steady despite everything they'd been through. "You've taken care of me this whole time. Let me return the favor." James watched her work, struck by the role reversal. She'd started this as someone who needed protecting. Now, she was the one keeping him together. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "Trusting me, fighting with me, not giving up." Sarah's hands paused. She looked up at him, those deep violet eyes holding his. "You gave me something no one else ever has." "What's that?" "A reason to fight." She leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, testing, then deeper as James responded, his good arm pulling her closer. She tasted like copper and dust and something uniquely her. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should probably discuss the fact that we're different species," Sarah said. "Probably," James agreed, "but right now I don't care." "Me neither." She rested her forehead against his. "What happens next?" "I don't know, but we'll figure it out together." The comm crackled to life. "Unidentified vessel, this is Cathari diplomatic ship Horizon's Promise. We are transmitting authorization codes from Chancellor Davros. Please respond." James and Sarah looked at each other. He keyed the comm. "This is the unidentified vessel. We're listening." Captain Harding, Sarah. The voice was older, carrying weight and weariness. This is Chancellor Davros. I received your transmission, all of it, and I have some things I need to say to my daughter. Sarah's hand found James's and squeezed tight. I'm here, Father. Then please, come home, both of you. Let me try to make this right. 3 months later, James stood on a balcony overlooking the newly established demilitarized zone. Behind him, diplomats from 6 species argued details of the peace treaty that Sarah's broadcast had made inevitable. The consortium had collapsed under investigation. Varric and 24 others were awaiting trial. Sarah rolled up beside him in the advanced mobility exoskeleton her people had developed, inspired, she'd told him, by human prosthetic technology. She could walk now, sort of. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. They're still arguing about paragraph 17, she said. Politicians. James put his arm around her shoulders. At least they're arguing instead of shooting. True, she leaned into him. My father wants to give you a medal for saving my life and exposing the conspiracy. I don't need a medal. I know, but humor him. He's trying. Sarah looked up at James. He asked me what I wanted after everything. You know what I told him? What? That I already have it. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. A partner who sees me. Not the disability, not the political liability, just me. Someone who chose me when no one else would. James pulled her closer. Best choice I ever made. They stood together as the sun set over the demilitarized zone, watching the last of the war machines being decommissioned. In the distance, ships from both sides were docking peacefully for the first time in years. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was a beginning. And sometimes James thought, as Sarah's head rested on his shoulder, a beginning was enough.